Hey guys, it's Thorn. It's really bright out here, and if I were smarter, I would move my chair to the other side of the table so that the sun wasn't right there in my face, but I feel like I've already committed, so now I have to keep going, so I'm just going to squint at you for however long this video is, and that's fine, but I'm outside on my porch, and I'm journaling, and I'm reading, and I have my cup of tea because that's very witchy or something. I don't know. I didn't like tea for years and years, and then basically I was just like honestly like abusing alcohol and caffeine, so I was like, oh, fine, tea. So now it's not even so much that I love tea, it's that it's something warm to drink that sort of mimics the experience of drinking other things. So I have tea. Anyway, we had circle last night, and I'm out here now, and I'm journaling, and I am reading Transcendental Magic by Eliphas Levi, or Levy. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. And I was supposed to go to a Gnostic mass this afternoon, so like I'm just over here like with my witchy tea that I don't even really like, and my ceremonial magic book, and my circle last night, and my magic journal, and then like a Gnostic mass later, and I'm just kind of feeling sort of ridiculous for how much I participate in and how much I do. So I wanted to kind of talk about personal practice and what that looks like, and like involvement in groups. And I get asked a lot about how I balance things, because you know, working full-time and like having a spouse and having a household and just kind of having like the regular mundane sort of things that go along with just being alive, and some of y'all have kids on top of it, so you know, power to you, because I don't think I'd be able to do that. But just kind of keeping all that stuff in balance while also pursuing a magical path. And it sort of occurs to me with everything that I do and with everything that I participate in, and this goes for things like reading too, like I'm not saying like, you know, all these groups that I'm in, because some of these groups I'm not even in, right? Like a Gnostic Mass is a public event, etc. But some of the stuff applies to reading too, like how do you, when there's so much to learn and so much you potentially could be doing, how do you find the time, or how do you keep all the balls in the air? Balls. And for me, it has a lot to do with recognizing the commonality in all of these various things that I'm doing. Like the purpose of keeping a magical journal, a book of shadows, a record isn't just like to make a beautiful book, like that's a byproduct. The purpose is actually to learn the skills surrounding introspection, and you know, it's a meditative practice too. Like the end goal isn't to just have a coven record. I mean, that's part of it, and that's really great, but it's actually to learn to be reflective, which is a learned skill. Like that's not something that people inherently are. I saw this with my kids when I was teaching. Reflection, introspection, the ability to look back on past experiences and say something useful about them is something that takes a lot of practice. It's not an inborn ability, and that's what journaling is for. So that's what I'm doing. So when I journal about, you know, my coven, or when I just journal privately, it's about sort of picking up the threads of my experiences and my thoughts and weaving them into something that's coherent. And that touches on my work as a Gardnerian, or my work just privately as a witch, my exploration of ceremonial traditions, or whatever I'm reading about that day, like how do they interweave. So like now, for example, I'm sitting out here and I'm reading Transcendental Magic, and this is it's a really difficult book, and I'm looking at a couple of different versions of it, and I'm journaling, and you know, like plotting through it very slowly, and looking at how, oh my God, like look how this connects to all of this other work that I've done, or look how this speaks to my work as a Wiccan, or what I've seen in the OTO, or, you know, whatever whatever it is that I'm sort of participating in. Like, how do you, these are not discrete traditions. Like, I think in pagan spaces we really like to put up boundaries in terms of what traditions we practice and the labels we use for ourselves. But the longer I do this, the more inclined I am to see the similarities between various traditions, whether they're witch traditions or other kinds of magical traditions. We just have so much in common, and we have a lot more in common with each other than I think we always do with people outside of our kind of broad magical scope. And I think that's a resource that a lot of us overlook sometimes. I certainly have in the past. So like reading, a really good example is like reading somebody like Aleister Crowley or some of the other magicians working at that period, but particularly Crowley. Like reading Aleister Crowley like isn't me, you know, abandoning my interest in Wicca or my identity as a Wiccan or whatever. It's seeing like how these traditions overlap and intertwine. This is something we're talking about on my Patreon as we read Ronald Hutton. It's really useful looking at what Hutton has to say about how some of these traditions interconnect and how their personalities overlap, and how we've shared historical texts and we've shared sort of you know, historical kinds of inspiration in order to build our traditions and to develop them. And by looking outside of witchcraft and Wicca specifically, but witchcraft as a whole, seeing where those threads run through other traditions, that's really helpful. I think we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes when we tell ourselves that we're practicing something discrete. Witches in particular do this. Like, we're so obsessed with like, well, I'm definitely not Wiccan, or I'm a traditional witch, or I'm initiated into this tradition, I'm a Gardnerian, or whatever the fuck. Like, we're so invested in making sure that our monikers are respected that I think we overlook what we can learn from each other, and what we have in common. Yeah, so anyway, that's how I centralize my studies and my work. Like when I'm out here and it looks like I'm doing 5 things at once, I'm really doing a singular thing. I'm just looking at multiple sources. Anyway, that perspective, that's something that I've really only realized in the last probably like year or two, but that's been really helpful, because for a long time I felt like I was just being pulled in different directions, or like, you know, is my interest really shifting over here? What does it mean that I'm curious about this text that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what I've been doing? Or like, why do I feel this emotional connection over here to something else that looks different? What does this say about where I am now? And, you know, kind of having that internal panic moment. You know, like fear of change, that's what happens. But through journaling and through reflection, and honestly through therapy, realizing that I'm still asking the same core questions. Like the goal hasn't shifted. It's just the sources that I'm pulling from and the languages that are increasingly making sense to me or not. Like all of that stuff is intertwined. So anyway, that's what I'm out here journaling about, and reading Transcendental Magic, which is kicking my ass, which is fine. It's really gratifying. So I hope you're well, and I've got some videos that I've already made that for whatever reason the internet isn't letting me upload. So we'll get around to that, but hope you all are well, and remember to be nice on the internet.